My name is Jeremy Goldberg. As a legal aid lawyer, I've been part of an effort for the last 20 years to exonerate a wrongly convicted man, Ronald Bower. With this message, I hope to communicate directly with the victims of sexual assault in Nassau and Queens, who identified Ron as their attacker, as well as with numerous other women, mainly in Queens, who were victims of sexual assault over a roughly 2-year span, which ended on August 6th of 1991. That was 3 months after Ron Bower was already in jail. The man arrested that night, a New York City police officer, looked so much like Ron facially that even people close to them could have mistaken one for the other. Several law enforcement investigators of great experience and impeccable credentials strongly believe that the man arrested that night had committed many sexual assaults in the years before his arrest, including the crimes of which Ron was convicted. Miss E, the Nassau victim. In late December of 1990, you left a nightclub in Western Nassau and drove to a diner near the border with Queens late at night. You parked and went into the diner. When you came out and were getting into your car, you were attacked by a man in your own car. That man had been to the nightclub when you were there. When you left, he followed you in his car, saw you park, and knew that you would soon come out. So he parked his car and waited for you to come out. Ron Bower had no car. 8 months later, after Ron was in jail, a woman left a nightclub in Queens, was dropped off in Flushing, near where she lived at about 4 a.m., and was sitting in her parked car, ready to go upstairs, when she was attacked. The man who attacked her was caught in the middle of what the victim said was a sexual assault after he crashed her car trying to flee the police. So we know with complete certainty that that man was a male Hispanic, 30 years old, 5'6" or 5'7", 155 pounds, with brown eyes, brown or black hair, who wore gloves. I think you will agree that this sounds very much like the man about 5'7", with a mustache, wearing a dark leather or vinyl bomber-style jacket and jeans or chinos, who attacked you, Miss E. If they were the same man, then it couldn't have been Ron Bower. When the other man, the police officer, was arrested at the scene, he had in his possession a .38 caliber Colt 6-shot revolver with a 2-inch barrel. I know that you know something about guns, Miss E, and I think you'll agree that this sounds very much like the .38 with a small barrel that your attacker used against you. About that gun. There was never any real firearm associated with Ron Bower. What was recovered from his ex-wife's residence in Queens was a starter's pistol. The same detective who provided the gun at Ron's trial in Nassau had testified in Queens that the gun he had recovered was a starter's pistol and that he had vouchered it into the evidence locker. Police documents confirm that. In Nassau, he showed you a real snub-nosed revolver, and he said that he had gotten it out of his own locker. There was never any real gun associated with Ron Bower, and if the gun you were shown at the Nassau trial was a real one, and if the gun used to attack you was a real one, then your attacker was not Ron. He had no car. He had no gun. About that detective who furnished the gun shown to you in Nassau, his name was Matt Fogarty. He made it known to his colleagues at the Queens Sex Crime Squad that he believed that Ron was innocent. I don't know if he had arrived at that conclusion when he showed you that gun, which had nothing to do with Ron Bower. I would now like to talk to two Queens women, Ms. C and Ms. S, who, in connection with one incident, identified Ron as the man who had sexually assaulted them. About a month after the assault on you, in May of 1991 at 3 a.m. in Forest Hills, there was another sexual assault where a small silver gun was used at 5 a.m. about a mile away off Queens Boulevard after Ron was already in jail. The attacker was described as 5'6" to 5'7", 155 pounds, with brown eyes and brown or black hair, wearing a white t-shirt, gray stonewashed jeans, white sneakers, a black biker jacket tight at the waist, and a gold chain. I think that has to sound pretty familiar to you, since you were attacked by a man, as was the Nassau victim, who you described to have a mustache and to be wearing a waist-length leather jacket, light acid-wash jeans, white sneakers, and black gloves. Ron and this man look amazingly alike facially, though Ron is a bigger man, a few inches taller, and 40 or 50 pounds heavier. How likely do you think it is that two men who look so much alike were wearing exactly the same clothes, committing the same crimes, using a black or silver .38 a mile away and a month apart? If they were the same man, as police investigators believe, that man could not have been Ron Bower. Again, he was in jail at the time of the latter assault. Miss C and Miss S, you even gave the police accurate information at the beginning. When you saw Ron in a lineup, you told the police that he looked like the attacker and that Ron wasn't the attacker, but he had the same face. Several other women told the police this as well. This was exactly correct. Ron did look like the attacker, and you could say that they had the same face. But it was that other man who continued using his silver .38 to continue to attack women after Ron was already in jail, who in fact attacked you. As with Miss E of Nassau, that man was at the bar that you two were at, and then he followed you when you left it. You left on foot, so there was no car involved. In case no one has ever told you this, you should also know that Ron long ago passed a polygraph which established his innocence to the satisfaction of the world's leading polygraph examiner. Ron, a high school dropout who tends to be a very emotional person, is not a person who is going to fool a polygraph given by the greatest expert in the field. To these three women who identified Ron, I say that mistake was not of your making. You were never given a chance to identify your actual attacker, although almost none of his victims were, because the fact that a New York City police officer was being tried as a serial sexual predator in Queens was completely kept from public knowledge. It was not covered in any media whatsoever, although it should have been on the front page. And now, if you had seen the face of that man on the front page or on the nightly news and had heard what he was being accused of in the incidents for which he was tried but managed to be acquitted, very much thanks to his trials being kept from the media, I believe with all my heart that you would have immediately recognized him to be the man who had attacked you. And Ron's nightmare of wrongful imprisonment would have ended after a few months rather than continue for decades. So the mistake was not of your making. It was nonetheless an error of great magnitude. And I realize that it takes an act of tremendous character to acknowledge an error of great magnitude. But I believe that if you can find that character within yourself to acknowledge that error, you may find that to be one of the most uplifting acts of your life. Because from all of the misery which surrounds this situation, the damage done to you by these awful crimes, and the suffering Ron has endured for 23 years, you can still help to salvage something of worth, which is the remainder of Ron's life. And to make something positive arise from something terrible is a rare opportunity in life, and to do so can be a source of a unique joy that could prove more than anything else you could do to heal you from the scars that you were left with as a result of these awful assaults on you. So I urge you, Ms. E, Ms. C, and Ms. S, to think about what I've been able to tell you here. And if you think that there is any way that you can help save the rest of Ron's life, or even if you just want to talk about the situation further, I beg you to get in contact with the Long Island Press at tips@longislandpress.com and let us know that you would like to talk to me. If you help save Ron, I think you will end up feeling that this was the greatest thing that you ever did in your life. So I beg you to please help us. It'll be very hard to save him without your help. Now I'd like to talk to some other of the many victims involved here. First, there are the two women whose attacks occurred after Ron was in jail, for which the police officer was tried and acquitted. Ms. P., you were smart and tough when you left that club you worked at in June of 1991 at 5 a.m., and as you exited your car, you were approached by a man armed with a small silver gun. He forced you down a stairwell and tried to make you perform oral sex, but you convinced him that he didn't have to force you, and when you got to your building, you escaped by running into the building and alerting the lobby attendant. At trial, somehow the jury had doubts about who the person was who attacked you, but you didn't have any doubts. I know it's a lot to ask, but it could be that your help, even if directly, could exonerate Ron Bower. If you would like to help, please get in touch with the Long Island Press at tips@longislandpress.com. Maybe you could help save the rest of Ron's life. The same goes to the woman, a different Ms. S., who spoke in a particular Chinese dialect and who was attacked in August of 1991. It must have been terribly frustrating for you to know that the man who attacked you was acquitted of that crime, perhaps because the jury was led to believe that your encounter with him was consensual. You know that it was not. So again, I know it's a lot to ask, but if you would like to help, please get in contact with the Long Island Press at tips@longislandpress.com. Maybe you too could help save the rest of Ron's life. Besides these two women, there are two others already known who might be able to help save Ron Bower. In January of 1991, the two of you, Ms. R. and Ms. B., had gone to a pool hall in a deli and were walking to a friend's house in Queens near the Nassau border. A man about 5'7", armed with a small silver handgun, approached you and started to sexually assault you before he broke it off. Ron Bower was tried twice for that crime in the same two trials, which ended up in him being convicted in Queens after the first jury would not convict him. As you know, Ron was acquitted of the crime against you, even though he was tried twice for it. You were teenagers then, I believe. Even though Ron was acquitted of the crime against you, you might still be able to provide us with valuable information. Police investigators believe that the same man that we're talking about, who isn't Ron, is the man who attacked you. I think you should be given a chance to see if that's true. So if you're willing to help us, please get in contact again with the Long Island Press at tips@longislandpress.com and let us know that you would like to talk to me. The last victims to whom I want to speak are women who were sexually assaulted by a man who meets the description that you've heard in this message in the years before August 6, 1991. It is believed that there are many of you and that your attacker is likely to be that same police officer who was acquitted of two attacks when his trials were kept out of the news. If I were you, I would not be too happy about either part of that your attacker was a police officer and that his trials were kept out of the news, because then you may have had a chance, if he was in the news, to identify him and he would not have avoided paying for his crimes. You might be able to play a part in saving the rest of Ron Bower's life. If you're willing to do that, please get in contact with the Long Island Press at tips@longislandpress.com. I thank you all for listening. As Ron's lawyer, I'm just trying to save his life, or at least the rest of his life. But I think anybody listening should be outraged that the public was kept in the dark about a police officer being tried as a serial sexual predator, and that an innocent man was allowed to be convicted of crimes committed by that predator. If anyone can help us make that wrong right, I beg you to do so, because your help could prove crucial. Thank you.